All right. Hey, welcome to another episode of Coach P's Perspective. I am pumped. I have a retired Lieutenant Commander Daniel Cnossen on here, and I'm going to go through just a couple of his highlights real quick because there are a lot of them. But, Dan was a Navy SEAL and was injured or wounded in combat. Just being a Navy SEAL is absolutely incredible. And then post SEALs, he has gone on. He has 7 Olympic medals, 2 golds, just got back from competing. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then something else really cool is I'm the wrestling coach at Shawnee Heights High School in Topeka, Kansas. And that's where Dan went to school at. He is a legend out here. I've had a few people tell me about him. And this is the first time we've actually got to meet here via Zoom. So Dan, man, thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Chad. It's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me as part of your podcast. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, sir. So, let's do this. I mentioned, you went to Shawnee Heights, but let's talk about your background, where you grew up, some of the sports you played, and then kind of up into college.
Sure. Well, I have deep roots in Kansas, and my family built a home back in the 1870s, part of the Homestead Act. They farmed the land. And this is on my mother's side, my grandfather's grandfather. So 5th generation Kansan. And I have a deep connection to Kansas and to the land. And growing up on this farm, we had about 240 acres. I would roam around outside as a kid. We had a section of woods we called the Northeast Corner, and with a creek running through it. And yeah, it was just a great place to grow up. And I developed a deep love of being outside and playing and nature. Got into a little bit of trouble with my BB gun, shooting things I shouldn't have been shooting. But as far as sports go, I played soccer. I think I started soccer when I was about 5, and baseball. I tried basketball, wasn't very good at it. Turns out ball sports, and probably not my calling as an athlete, but certainly many, many other lessons that I learned from team ball sports that came into play in my military career. I tried wrestling, was not good at it, and did a little bit of club boxing at the Golden Gloves Club in Topeka. And combative sports are not my sport either, but it turns out I'm pretty good at endurance. I did try track the senior year of high school because I knew I was going to the Naval Academy at that point. It was pretty good at distance running, but only did that one season. But soccer was my main sport, and I played varsity soccer all 4 years at Shawnee Heights. And really, I think, not so good at soccer, but I was good at the running part and trying to just, as a defender, get the ball away from the other team and just get it to one of my teammates who can do something with it. My sister and I were pretty close, with those separated by 7 years. Had a really good family structure, parents, and as a kid, I liked reading and was pretty focused, at least in high school, because I had this goal of getting into the Naval Academy. And I knew that if I was going to have any chance of getting accepted into the Naval Academy, I needed to have good grades, demonstrate some leadership, and demonstrate athletic potential. They're kind of looking at the holistic candidate. And so being a varsity soccer player, I thought was good. I wasn't going to be recruited for soccer at the Naval Academy, but at least it demonstrated some athleticism. And I just needed to stay focused with the classes and tried to get straight A's, and then tried to develop some leadership. I ran for student government my junior year as well. And then I also volunteered for the S Naval Sea Cadets, which is a program that I don't know if it exists, right? I hope it still does in Topeka. I know we were drilling out of the Reserve Center that has since shut down. But this is a program geared towards enlisting in the Navy. And I joined the Sea Cadets in my sophomore year, got to go in the summer training between academic years, kind of a boot camp phase in Great Lakes, which is where all sailors in the Navy go to boot camp. And then I did amphibious training the next summer. And then the summer before my senior year, I got to go to a SEAL camp, which was super cool. And we had like a night of Hell Night modeled after the Hell Week of Bud's training. And I got to see what it would be like to be a SEAL. And this was something that really intrigued me. I applied to the Naval Academy in my junior year. It's a tough process, but I was fortunate enough to get accepted. And I went to the Naval Academy, really actually wanting to be a Marine. My father had been a Marine in the Vietnam timeframe, and with my eyes a little bit on the SEAL program, but not thinking I had any chance because I was not very good in the water. But that takes me into the college years.
So pretty early on, you knew you wanted to, go the military route. Was it because of your father? Was that the influence that made you want to go to the Naval Academy, or what kind of initially led you that direction?
Well, that's a good question. I've thought about this. And I think the way when I can put myself back into my high school years, it wasn't so much a choice. I say that, of course, I chose to go in the military. And I don't think that in any way whatsoever my parents were pointing me in that direction. This was my own choice. Now, maybe it was formed by somewhat my reverence for my father, from movies, from books. I was just reading any book I could find on Vietnam, uh, special operations in Vietnam. This all just naturally intrigued me. And at one point, I kind of thought I wanted to be a naval aviator or military pilot. At one point, maybe I thought I wanted to be on a ship. At one point, I wanted to be a Marine. I was kind of interested in the SEAL program. It was all kind of around military. And I also knew that I wanted to combine going to college and furthering my education with going in the military. So I was drawn towards wanting to be an officer in the military, one who typically has a college degree and then is a manager of enlisted personnel.
Yeah, just getting into any of our military academies is it's a huge honor, and it's exceptionally hard to do. So, we sent one of our young men to West Point last year from our wrestling program, and I've got to interview a couple of different people who went to Naval Academy or who went to military academies, and I know it's not easy to do. So, you were, I want to say, very disciplined even as a high school student, to be able to kind of have all those ducks in a row and be able to do all those things.
Yeah, for anybody listening who's in high school, I mean, if you do want to go to a service academy, you do have to have your ducks in a row, certainly by your junior year. That's when things really start to happen. So it's just, and it's tough as a kid. You don't always know what you want to do. I was blessed in the sense that as soon as my freshman year, for whatever reason, it was the Naval Academy. That's the one I wanted to go to. And I applied to West Point as well, but really I wanted to go to the Naval Academy. And the reason I wanted to go there was because there's just so many options that you can do after you graduate. I felt like if you go to West Point, you're in the Army. If you go to the Air Force Academy, you're in the Air Force. If you go to the Naval Academy, you can go in the Navy. You can be on a ship. You can be in a submarine. You can fly planes or helicopters for the Navy. You could be a SEAL. You could be explosive ordnance disposal, special operations. And then there's the Marine Corps, which is like its own army unto itself. And so I just felt like the variety of jobs that you could do after you graduate was just so much greater than the other service academies. And Annapolis, Maryland, where the Naval Academy is located, is just, in my mind, it's a more fun place. It's right in, the Naval Academy is right in Annapolis. So you got a city right there, whereas West Point and the Air Force Academy are kind of secluded. And I thought that mentally that would be a nice break. It wouldn't feel as isolated.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to let it pass by. You also have a degree from Harvard. So was this before SEALs? Was this at what point did you spend some?
Oh, yeah. Well, this is jumping pretty far forward and not,
and then we'll come back.
Not too long ago. I was getting out of the Navy, and it was 2014, and I had been injured, and that's kind of getting further into the story, but I was exiting from the military, and I thought that I would go to graduate school. It just seemed like it was the right time in my life. I could use the GI Bill, which is a really great benefit for service members. And I had friends who had gone to the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. These were SEALs, and they highly recommended this program. And so I went there, and then it's just a one-year program. I was there very much in my mind training as a Paralympic athlete still, but worried that in graduate school I may not have enough time to train. But with discipline and time management, I was able to train and really just liked being in school. It opened my eyes, my mind, new ideas, meeting new people from all over. And I realized I want to stay in school just beyond one year goes so fast. And it's not even a full year. It's just 2 semesters. So I applied to Harvard Divinity School, not so much for jobs or anything, job placement, but more for curiosity. And that was a 2-year program. So I ended up doing 2 degrees, and this took 3 years, and I was very much still a full-time Paralympic athlete. And that led into the 2018 Paralympic Winter Games, my second games.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't want to let that pass by as we're talking about college because
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I mean, if I have just a little bit of space to say that when I am a student athlete, either at the Naval Academy, because every student at a service academy is considered a student athlete, whether you're varsity, club, or intramural sport, everybody is playing a sport. And so part of every day, not just studying, is actually athletics. And so I took that mindset into graduate school, but as a much more serious and focused athlete. And I have to say that it really helped me. I had gone to the 2014 Paralympic Winter Games as a full-time athlete, just training. It was newer, but without much else going on in my life, I found that I was building up a lot of pressure upon myself. And when I was a student athlete, I had this whole other thing going on, just class and studies and social, just meeting new people. And so, yeah, it took my mind off of the pressure of competition, and it was a really good thing. And I think the balance of being a student athlete is just awesome. You're working on your mind and your body, and it's holistic development.
I'm glad you said that. And then actually I've written down to talk about mindset here in a little bit, because I'm also a mindset coach, and to be able to pick the brain of an Olympian and a Navy SEAL when it comes to mindset, this is a golden opportunity for me to be able to learn from you and to be able to hear those things. But so, all right, so let's go back now. At what point did you decide, I think I want to be a SEAL? And then tell me about that process.
Sure. So I showed up at the Naval Academy in the summer of '98, just after Shawnee Heights, and it was 6 weeks after graduating Shawnee Heights. And this is called I-Day, induction day. It's kind of like a boot camp. It's not actually Navy boot camp, but it's called Plebe Summer. And as a plebe is a freshman at the Naval Academy. But before the academic year starts, you have to do this 6-week indoctrination program, Plebe Summer. You're ripped away from home, and upperclassmen are yelling at you. It's pretty stressful. But I was pretty well equipped. I was a good runner, good at sort of this military discipline, and physically fit. That really helped. And in that environment, I was finding that I'm doing pretty well. I just had butterflies in my stomach every day that we'd have to go to the swimming pool for basic pool drills. You have to demonstrate to the Navy that you can float, or that you can swim from one side of the pool to the other side of the pool. This was actually making me nervous. I would have butterflies in my stomach. I just wasn't exposed to swimming as a kid growing up on the farm in Topeka. And so I just thought, there's no way I'm going to be a SEAL. I mean, I'm interested in the SEAL teams, but because it's elite and you're part of this small team, but I'm not good at the water. So I still wanted to be a Marine. But by the end of the first year there, that plebe year, all of my friends, down to a person, we weren't organized in the same company. We just found each other amongst the 1,200 students in our class, midshipmen. They all wanted to be selected for the SEAL program when we would graduate in 2002, a few years down the road. And I started thinking, well, that's fairly telling. I mean, we have this common interest, common personality, and all of these people want to be SEALs. And a couple of them were high school All-American swimmers, now varsity swimmers as freshmen for the Naval Academy. One was one of my friends was a really, really good boxer. And I found that out the hard way trying to spar with him in the ring. And then there was me, and I wasn't a standout athlete. I wasn't a recruited athlete. I wasn't a varsity athlete or anything like that. I was fit, could run well and do pull-ups and push-ups, but I was just atrocious in the water. But we started kind of just training each other, and I got better in the water. I knew that I needed to get better in the water. So just about every day for my 4 years at the Naval Academy, I was at the swimming pool. We have wonderful, wonderful athletic facilities there and multiple swimming pools to choose from. I would work on my stroke, breath holding, drown proofing, you name it. But mainly it's just trying to get better in the water. And eventually I was getting better and better and better. And to the point where I thought, this at least isn't holding me back from getting selected. It's very competitive to get one of the 16 spots. At the time, it was 16 spots to go to SEAL training after graduation.
So once you got selected for that, to be able to be one of those 16 spots, I think most of us have probably read, well, I guess I can't put everybody in the same box, but I know me, and I think in the wrestling world, we have a lot of wrestling people. A lot of us love the SEALs. We love spec ops. We just, the mindset, the training, those type of things, I think they jive really well. So a lot of us have probably either read books or watched movies about SEALs and about buds and all that type of stuff. But so tell me a little bit about that process, man, because for anyone to train as hard as you guys do, but it's not just that week, right? I mean, there's lots of other training that goes on, but tell me a little bit about that process, that training, and then like, how do you get through it? I mean, here, some people are like, you can't think of the whole thing. You got to just think like, I just got to make it to lunch, or I just got to make it through this exercise. Like, what were you thinking during the process?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. It is ultimately about mindset. And I came to know people who got through all of BUDS and became Navy SEALs who were not athletes. In fact, never had even played a sport. And then you have some who are maybe semi-pro triathletes or college football, like serious, like Division I college football players who do not get through the part. They quit, or maybe they get injured. In many cases, quit though. I can't. I don't know why someone gets through and why someone doesn't. I was thinking about why did I want to do this? Why? What drove me to want? I'm at the Naval Academy now. I got there because I wanted to be a Marine, but clearly, even in high school, I had this curiosity about what it would be like to be a SEAL. I had gone to the Sea Cadet SEAL training camp and was really just in awe of Navy SEALs. They just seemed like just the ultimate soldier. But at the Naval Academy, my friends wanted to do it, and I was, at least try out. And I thought, this is an ultimate challenge. And if I don't get selected for this, maybe I'd rather second choice. I want to go in the Marine Corps. I don't know if they would have taken me, but I think ultimately it was to be part of a small team, to be to challenge myself, to be part of an elite team, to do something special. And then 9/11 happened my senior year at the Naval Academy, and that really struck home that if I get selected for SEAL training, if I get through all of it, it's going to be tough. It pushed me to my limits. But if I get through it, I'll be directly involved in our nation's response to those attacks. And this is serious. We're at war now. And so the decision to go into the SEAL teams was not just now something based on adventure or can I do this? It had real consequences. Certainly, if you draw a line to what eventually happened to me, what happened to many of my teammates who are no longer alive, it draws directly from 9/11. So it was a major, major event. Well, I got to BUDS. Just from the Naval Academy, it was very exciting to get one of those 16 spots. All that meant was I was now at the front door, and they don't care where you're from, whether you went to the Naval Academy, they don't care. So I showed up, and you do kind of like a 3, 4, 5 week indoctrination phase. You're kind of doing general PT, getting used to the place, getting used to the obstacle course, which is very tough, doing some swimming, giving classes on how to swim, the side stroke. And then you class up, and the first day of first phase is very long. And this is just one day of training, and this isn't even Hell Week. And first phase is just a total beatdown. Hell Week starts about the 4th or 5th week in first phase. You're already kind of broken down and tired by the time it gets to Hell Week, but they've now taught you how to do everything you're going to do in Hell Week. So you know how to do log PT, basic boat drills and this kind of thing. And now you have to do these drills under conditions of extreme pressure and sleep deprivation, intensity, people around you quitting. I was thinking to myself, don't get too close to anybody because you don't know who's going to quit. That was advice that someone had given me. Don't get too close. Because if your buddy quits, it's that much easier for you to now quit. Yeah. But I was living with 5 of my Naval Academy friends, and I was telling myself, there's just no way I can go back to that apartment that we were all crammed into in Imperial Beach, south of Coronado, and having quit. There's just no way I can do this. So it was a combination of my own internal motivation and desire to get through this job and to get through this so that I could do this job, to see if I could make it through this amazing challenge personally. But then there were also bigger reasons, I alluded to 9/11 happening. And then there was some of the external motivation, which is just that I was living with friends, and I just couldn't go back to that apartment having quit. Now I can certainly tell you more about Hell Week if you're interested in the ins and outs of that. or we can move on.
Yeah, as much as you want to expound upon it, man. I mean, yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more, actually.
Sure. Yeah. So for those who don't know, Hell Week is this really crucible week in BUDS training. BUDS stands for Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL. BUDS is about 7 months long. You graduate from that, you're not a SEAL yet. You still have follow-on training, but BUDS is kind of what people know about. And if they've heard about BUDS, they've maybe heard about Hell Week. And this week gets a lot of the attention because it's so extreme. It's probably the most extreme selection event, or at least one of the most extreme in the entire US military, at least at the special operations level. And you start this week on a Sunday. You don't really know when it's going to kick off, but you're kind of sitting there waiting. Your class is all together in an isolation room. You're waiting. There's a lot of tension in the air. You can almost cut it with a knife. I remember, it's like somebody quit before this even started. You just think like, I'm not going to sleep once. It's Sunday right now. I woke up that morning and I'm now in an isolation room waiting for Hell Week to start. I'm not going to sleep until Wednesday. So I got to go all the way through tonight. I got to do all of tomorrow, Monday, all of Monday night into Tuesday, all of Tuesday night. And then at some point on Wednesday, I'm going to get a sleep break and I'm going to be a zombie, and I'm going to have to wake up from that short sleep break and get right back into training. And if something's off in my head, and maybe I can't even control my mind because I'm just totally sleep deprived. Maybe I'm just going to quit, or am I even going to have control over myself? I'm thinking all these thoughts. That first sleep break, you only get a couple more after that. And Hell Week ends sometime on Friday during the day, midday. But you don't know exactly when it's going to end. So in these 5.5 days of training, you're going to be pushed to your absolute limit. You're going to be brought to hypothermia. You're going to be tempted constantly to quit, and you're going to be assessed. How do you operate as a teammate? In my case, how do I operate as a leader, as an officer? You learn a lot about people. You learn a lot about yourself when you are in extreme conditions like this. And so as you're sitting there waiting for Hell Week to start, knowing that this whole thing is in front of you is extremely intimidating. And once it starts, though, you're just in it. And you had mentioned this earlier, just saying, like, make it to the next meal, or make it through this evolution. That's ultimately what I learned. And it really, really does help get through difficult situations. Instead of thinking about the future. I mean, in reality, the future, it doesn't exist. It only exists as thoughts right now in our mind. But what actually exists is right now. And I just learned to focus on right now and try to do that. And your mind wants to wander. But the easier part of Hell Week was actually after Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. For me, was actually the easiest. You kind of become this zombie. When it's the hardest, I think, is like Monday, Tuesday. You're far enough into it to be feeling the pain and the sleep deprivation, but yet your mind is still working. But once you kind of shut off a few days into it, it's not as bad. But yeah, it's extremely long. The nights just go forever. You don't have the reference of the sun like you do during the day to kind of mark time. You're not allowed to wear watches. You don't know when any race is going to end. You're just doing a log race, let's say, racing the other teams in the class. Everything is a race. They say it pays to be a winner, but you don't know when the race is going to end. You just know that you need to win, because the SEAL instructors are trying to drive home a critical lesson. That is that losing in combat has severe consequences. So you need to find ways to win. And if you lose, you get that much more of a punishment after a race that was already brutal. And then the next race quickly begins, and the team who won and finished towards the front, they're just more rested going into the next race. It's survival. And also during these races, people can quit. During your teammate, one or two people can drop out, and they don't reshuffle the teams until that evolution is over. So if I have a team of 7, my boat crew, under a log, if 2 people quit, we were in a serious big problem. because now whatever they were lifting with the log, now they're gone. And now it's just 5 of us that have to carry this thing. And the instructors don't care. You have to deal with it. And the whole thing can just fall apart. And so I learned as a leader to try to be positive, to channel my pain or my frustration or whatever was going on in my head, to channel it outward and to yell encouragement to the team. Let's go, let's go. Try to be positive. Maybe they wanted me to shut up, but I think it still helps. And number one is to lead by example. They're not going to, enlisted in your team are not going to respect you as an officer if you are not pulling your share of the weight. And so I really learned this lead by example lesson in Hell Week, no doubt.
That's, I mean, so many life lessons right there, right? For all of us, those in sports, if you're, if you run a business, as a parent, and there's so many life lessons right there. And gotta say, man, I was like feeling anxious as you were telling the story, just thinking about the sleep deprivation and thinking about the exercise and all that. I mean, to go through that, it's absolutely amazing. And I know it's absolutely essential at the same time. So let's kind of move forward now. You've become a SEAL, you've done everything you needed to do. And then now it's time to jump into action, so if you want to move forward into, going on, going overseas and, and then speak on your injury a little bit.
Sure. I ended up deploying in 2009. Now I had gotten through all of the SEAL training in 2003. And that was a big milestone for me. I reported to a West Coast SEAL team. I'm thinking, I've got a trident now. And I remember as a midshipman, the couple times that I ever get to see a Navy SEAL, there was usually one officer assigned to the Naval Academy, maybe one senior enlisted, and you see that big trident gold in designation of a Navy SEAL on the uniform. You're just in awe. And then now I have this on my chest, and that was surreal. And then I show up to the SEAL team and I realize nobody cares. Everybody has a trident. Nobody cares that I went through Hell Week. Nobody cares. I'm just a new guy all over again. And don't know anything really. I've been through some training, but it's basic training, qualification training, and you still have to do platoon workups. Haven't even deployed. When I did a few deployments as a junior officer, and the pipeline kind of goes, you're maybe assistant platoon commander, and then maybe you do a disassociated tour outside of a SEAL platoon, and then you come back and then you're a platoon commander, and maybe after that you're a troop commander. Maybe you do a disassociated tour again, but there's kind of this back and forth. And where you really want to be is in a platoon. That's the operational unit. I did my assistant platoon commander tour. Maybe not a lot of people realize this, but SEAL platoons don't all of them deploy at once or deploy to a combat zone. There are requirements that are not always in the combat zones. Now, Iraq is going off at this point in 2004. I got to the team in basically late 2003, and Afghanistan's going, but my first deployment was actually to Southeast Asia. My second deployment was to Southeast Asia. Some of this is arbitrary. It's due to timing, tasking, what's required, but some of it was just unlucky. And as an officer, I don't get endless amounts of platoon deployments. It seemed like many of the enlisted members can kind of deploy, but these deployments are precious. I'm only going to get a few of them before it's like I'm riding a desk for the rest of my career. And you go through all this training and you want to put your skills to the test. The real test is, of course, combat. And deploying to Southeast Asia, although important, certainly if the nation needs the platoon to go there, that's what we're going to do. But it's not the ultimate test of leadership and the training I've been through. And you want to be in a community and around a group of teammates that want to go to war, not people that are thinking like, well, I don't really want to go to combat, it's dangerous. Or you want to be with pipe hitters who want to go put their skills to the test. And so as a leader, when you go on a deployment that's not to Iraq or Afghanistan, it's sort of the reverse of maybe what would be happening in general units in the military, many of whom may have members that don't really want to go deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan. The SEAL teams by and large, just about everybody is just throttling to get over there and go do work and put our training to the test and think we can do good work over there. But when you go to Southeast Asia or a non-combat zone, for instance, South America, you're probably working with foreign special forces and training them. And guys can US SEALs can sometimes get frustrated. So there were leadership challenges, no doubt. And just also personal challenges, because I'm a few years into the teams now. I don't have combat experience, and many of the people who I'd gone through BUDS with, who had gone out to different teams, their deployments were to Iraq or Afghanistan, and so some of my best friends had these deployments where they're going on like 50 or 60 combat operations on a deployment, and perhaps getting in firefights. But really, this is sort of the mark of respect in the community. What I'm getting at is, by the time I deployed as a platoon commander, I didn't have direct combat experience. I hadn't been in a firefight. Being in a firefight isn't the end all. I mean, if you do your job correctly, there may not be any shots fired, but I had been on some operations, no shots fired, didn't have combat experience, but we knew that on this deployment, and I'm a platoon leader on this one, we were going to be absolute in the thick of it. And so we felt ready. We did a 1.5-year platoon training workup and went through all the blocks of training a SEAL platoon must go through in order to be certified, ready to deploy. And I went out early in advance of the rest of the platoon. This is standard procedure for a platoon. The leadership will go out early so that you can meet up with the platoon in country at the time. We'd be replacing them and see how they were planning and conducting the operations, so that by the time the rest of my platoon arrived a few weeks later, I'd be in a position of that much more experience on the ground. And that way we could then flow more seamlessly into our platoon operations. So I got on the ground in Afghanistan, southern Afghanistan, in September 2009. I knew that if I could just have one of these combat deployments that would really put my leadership in training to the test, I want it to be this one where, I had been frustrated before, but if there can only be one, I would want it to be the one where I'm the platoon leader. Yeah. You have the most at stake in that in that kind of a deployment. So here we are, and I met up with the platoon in country, and they were working with one other platoon, and we were going to be going pretty quickly on a nighttime assault operation. And I'm not going to have a leadership role in this one, just observing and certainly still acting as a basic shooter, but they're really to see how they're planning this operation, how they're briefing it, all the different actors and units that are in play, air support, etc. And then to go out on it and just see, kind of shadow the other platoon leader and just see how it's going on the ground. And this was going to be an assault operation, helicopter borne. We would take about a 40-member assault force via 2 MH-47 twin rotor helicopters out of Kandahar airfield. This would be a strike mission. So we're going to go in the middle of the night and we'll get off the helicopters. We'll foot patrol. I'm going to be part of a 10-person element that was assigned not to be part of the main assault force, but to basically to take a hilltop that overlooked the target compound down below. And we knew that at the top of that hill, there was an old structure. It was a fort actually from when the Russians were in Afghanistan, and we needed to own the high ground. That was our sort of sub mission. And once we had completed this mini objective, we radioed down to the main assault force. They would know that we were set in place, and then they would conduct that target assault prior to the first, or just prior to the first light. So that was the basic plan. And we got on the helicopters. It was about, I'd say, a 35-40-minute flight, and got off them. And when they departed, we started foot patrolling. We're on night vision goggles at this point. Everyone's trying to be quiet. You're looking through these goggles in a world that's green and black and kind of grainy, and no one's really talking. It's all hand and arm signals. We're moving forward. Everything is kind of going according to plan as we rehearsed and briefed it. And then when we got to the set point, the point at which the 10-person element that I was a part of detached from the main assault force, we did that. We got to the base of that large hill that overlooked the target compound. In my mind, I'm thinking it's about a 15-minute hike to get to the top. It was a big hill. We got to the top of it, and we're kind of spread out. moving forward, not knowing if there's anybody up there, but very much ready. We needed to clear and own the hilltop so we could complete our smaller objective. And we're moving forward, and I have my rifle ready, and I just remember taking some steps, and everything's green and black on the night vision goggles. And all of a sudden, there's just this flash of light under my night vision goggles, and I was on the ground, and I didn't know exactly or immediately what had happened or exactly what had happened, but it did dawn on me after a few moments that I probably stepped on a pressure plate IED, improvised explosive device. Pressure plates are buried underground, typically, and the weight of a person or object up above would cause the two plates to make a connection, and then the bomb would go off. And I didn't know at the time anything more than that. It turns out that the bomb was actually, I'm told, 2 105mm artillery shells. And these were wired together, intended to go off, but the second one didn't explode, and then the first one went off only partially. To make a long story short, though, my teammates responded really quickly and decisively and selflessly to save my life. They had to apply tourniquets. We had a medic, a SEAL combat medic, up there with us. None of my teammates were hurt, and that was critical. So they were able to respond, and they put their lives on the line to try to save mine. And that's one of the things that I just loved about being part of the SEAL teams. There, you know, when going back to what I was saying, this wasn't my group of people. A couple of them were with my unit, but most of them were from the unit we were going to be replacing. But they still responded and to try to save my life. And it's just awesome to be in a group of people that are like that. And they needed to get me off that hilltop. The helicopter that was going to come back and get me out of there wasn't going to land or hover on that hill. We hadn't cleared it. It's just too dangerous. You don't want to risk losing a bird. So my teammates had to get me off that hill. And it had been, a 15-20 minute hike to get to the top. And so they were trying to carry me to protect me, but it wasn't working, and it was just going too slow. And so they started dragging me. And that was the most excruciating thing I've ever been through. And any other event that I would consider painful pales in comparison to the pain of getting dragged. They're grabbing me by the shoulder straps of my kit and dragging me over sharp, craggy rocks. I mean, it was just very craggy and sharp for about, I don't know, it seemed to take forever, but it was probably 20 plus minutes of just getting dragged with the remnants of my lower body kind of trailing. And I remember just trying to stay awake. The medic was telling me to stay awake and just trying to talk to me and keep me engaged. And I think that fight for me mentally was the fight to stay alive. Although I can honestly say I remember this experience, and I didn't have even the slightest thought of dying. It just wasn't in my mind. And I think the reason was because the pain was just too intense. But I didn't have any of these external thoughts. And I think, if anything, this is just a real good example of just being very present. I had to be. And I think, if anything, pain kind of brings you into the present moment more than perhaps anything else. It was getting really close to the helicopters being out of fuel. There's a point called bingo fuel where they got to leave whether I'm on board or not. Otherwise, the helicopter will drop out of the sky from lack of fuel. The pilots don't mess around with that, but my teammates got me dragged onto the helicopter within 1 minute. Just one minute before the bingo fuel mark. So they really, I owe it to my teammates on the ground, but also the aircrew as well for getting me out of there. I remember the tail ramp going up after my friend, who had been the last person, he shook my hand. I'm still awake at this point. The tail ramp goes up, and they're going to continue with the operation. I'm now evacuated. The tail ramp went up. There was a light in my face from the flight surgeon on board the helicopter, and then I was out, and that was it. Lights out for me.
So, once they get you back they take you to the base. I mean, where do they take you for like immediate surgery, or like what's the process right then?
Well, I would imagine the flight surgeon on the helicopter started working on me, and then they landed at Kandahar Airfield. And I'm told I went through surgery after surgery there. I think after that operation, all of my teammates and SEALs came back from that operation. They all, I'm told, went through and said, they went through and visited my body. I mean, at this point, I am alive, but I'm not awake. I'm unconscious. And I'm told that it was not looking good, that for them, it was like, say goodbye to this guy because he's not going to make it. And I am also told that a high ranking SEAL officer in country was summoned to get down there to put the Purple Heart on me before I died. Doctors thought it's not looking good. And at some point, maybe miraculously, I kind of took a turn for the better and started to improve. You can't be flown anywhere else. You got to be stable to get flown to the next place. But Kandahar isn't the biggest air base or medical facility in Afghanistan. It's actually up in Bagram. And so the effort is to try to get you up there, but you got to be stable and be ready to be airlifted out of there, because you're very vulnerable in an aircraft. There's not as much of a facility or support. So I did get transported to Bagram, must have improved at that point to make that happen. And then from there to Landstuhl, Germany, where there's a much more robust medical center. So got to Germany, I'm still in a medically induced coma, and then was flown back to the United States on the big C-17 flying hospital, where I think there's just racks of injured service members coming back, some of them on IVs, maybe some are awake and lucid, but for me, I was in a medically induced coma. I land at Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland and then was transported to Bethesda Naval Hospital. My mother and sister were already there. They had been called up. My sister was fresh out of KU, a nurse, living in New York City. The job market was pretty tough. I don't think New York City was top on our list, but you go where the jobs are. And so she had been told via phone call what had happened to me. And then our mom in Kansas, in Topeka, was called. You can imagine what they were going through, but they both arrived in DC, and they were at Bethesda Hospital before I ever arrived. And I arrived at this point in a 10-day medically induced coma.
So once you were stable and started the recovery process, which I'm certain took a long time, where did you stay at that point? You saying your sisters, and your sister was a nurse, was she able to help you in this process? Did they, were you at a military facility like during the recovery? So what was the recovery like?
Sure. Well, the day that I woke up, I won't forget it. Now, granted, I had a fuzzy mind, but it was just one of those episodes that's kind of imprinted in my mind, even though it is fuzzy. And maybe it's just my memory of it is now taking on a life of its own. But I feel like I really remember that day, because I mean, I wake up. It's not like when you're in a 10-day medically induced coma, it feels like sleeping for a really long time. If I take a nap during the day and I sleep for an hour, I kind of have a sense of the time that's transpired. Or if I take a 15-minute nap, it feels different. Or if I sleep for 8 hours, I kind of have a sense. When you're in an induced coma, it's not sleep. You're unconscious. But when I woke up, my last memories were being dragged on a helicopter at night in Afghanistan. And then it's like, boom, now I'm in this room. I don't know that I woke up so suddenly, but still the shock of the difference in environment was there, because my last memories were being in Afghanistan. Now I'm in a hospital room, and my mother was about 2 feet away from me looking at me. And I'm just thinking, what's going on? I mean, it's like time travel. Like, how did I get here? What's going on? I mean, what's going on? And I remember at one point asking a medical professional to the right of my bed whether my legs were gone. I think perhaps during this induced coma, although I was unconscious, maybe it was more kind of in my subconscious, things were filtering in, and maybe conversations that people were having. I just remember, not looking down towards the end of my bed. No one was telling me anything specific. My mind was clouded by all the opiates coursing through my body. And I looked over to this person and asked, "Are my legs gone?" And they said yes. It's a tough thing to hear, but it's really hard to process. You start thinking, what is my life going to look like? I had gone from kind of being, relatively speaking, not feeling it at the time, but now in this situation, I feel like, yeah, a year ago, 2 years ago, I was on top of the world. A platoon leader at a SEAL platoon, and even 2 weeks ago, getting ready to deploy. This was my first combat deployment, the first real combat deployment, the first operation within the deployment. My platoon wasn't on the ground yet. My platoon mates, who were very well connected and gelled at this point, they're going to be on a long, rigorous deployment that I will not be a part of. I'm stuck here in this hospital room. The legs to be an operational SEAL are gone. They're not coming back. So much of my personal identity was wrapped up in being a Navy SEAL, and it felt like that was all gone overnight. So I'm just, all these thoughts are just flooding into my head. What is my life going to look like? How am I going to find, at a larger level, meaning and fulfillment now that I can't do this job anymore, at least the way that I've been doing it, no longer be operational? But also on a practical level, what is my life going to look like? Am I going to be in a wheelchair, or how am I going to shower? All these things, all these questions and doubts are coming into my mind, flooding into it, and combining with this adverse mental reaction that I'm having to the painkillers. And it's not a good combination.
Yeah.
I was going through surgery week after week after week, 3 days a week, sometimes 4. And these surgeries are 7, 10, 12 hours. A lot of surgery time. I find out that in addition to having both of my legs amputated above the knees, I've got a shattered pelvis. I've got a colostomy bag. I didn't even know what that was, but found out most people don't want a colostomy bag. I had a bladder tube coming out. How is this? Is this going to get fixed? If so, how? Going through the surgeries, I had a burning fever. This was from just potential infection from being dragged across a mountain's worth of dirt. So not a good, and this is like my ground zero. Yeah. And then, all these thoughts of the future that really started to kind of be the most difficult thing. Just thinking about the future. The future actually doesn't exist, but yet is what is weighing me down, even though I'm right here and right now in this hospital room. But ultimately, I did lean upon my mother, my sister, visitors, friends and family coming through, to the point of almost overwhelm. Too many visitors, too many people that weren't really close to me, like people on the periphery, and sometimes people that I didn't even know, but they had heard about what had happened and they just wanted to offer their support. Great intentions. You get an A for intention, but it was creating a very stressful environment, and I wasn't getting a lot of sleep, stressing out my mother. Dozens of visitors sometimes in the waiting room, and only can come in 2 at a time into my ICU room. So they're just coming in 2 at a time, 2 at a time, 2 at a time. It's dragging on. I'm not getting any sleep. So this had to get worked out, but I did rely upon the sequence of visitors and doctors and medical people coming through to create a sense of routine through my day. I requested therapy bands because I had all this scaffolding around my hospital bed, and not in the ICU. I mean, I was strapped to every monitor that, in every part of my body, and wasn't in any capacity to do any sort of physical exercise. But by the time I was out of the ICU and was an inpatient on the combat ward, I had rigged up therapy bands on the bed scaffolding so I could do arm curls and things like that. Just to create a sense, something to look forward to, in motion and mobility. When I realized that this is actually kind of like an anchor for me, this sense of like exercise and mobility, it just made me feel good, and it was something to look forward to. And through that process, I started to develop this day-by-day approach. Focus on today, just get through today. Worry about tomorrow, not even worry. Focus on tomorrow when you get there, but just right now, focus on today. Get through today, make it to tomorrow. Focus on tomorrow when you get there. Just going through that. And then just setting some goals, not huge ones. Just let's get out of the bed. Let's try to get into a wheelchair. Let's try to get outside into a courtyard. I was really missing the fresh air. So I started to create the kind of like these small attainable goals that I could look forward to. And then that also really helped me get through this difficult situation, in addition to all the support that I had.
All right. I have so many questions, but I don't want this to be a 4-hour because I want to respect your time. It's so mind blowing to me. And looking at the theme, it's kind of funny because I'm looking at you on the monitor right now and see myself, and I have a shirt on that says "Win the Day," and that's literally what you are doing, winning the day and going back to your SEAL training, just winning evolution after evolution, and so let's jump forward to at what point, because this is all talking about, your combat time and SEAL, but I mean, you're a 2-time Olympic champion now. So at what point did you decide, or were you even introduced to this opportunity to like, hey, I can go on and I can start training and I can find a new passion and a new purpose and something I'm great at. So tell me about the transition.
Sure. At the time that I was ending my rehabilitation and recovery at Walter Reed Military Medical Center, also in DC, I transferred from Bethesda over to Walter Reed for the actual physical therapy, learning how to walk and also later run on prosthetics. I was approached by a Paralympic liaison officer, someone who was assigned to Walter Reed to try to recruit military members into Paralympics. The Paralympics were actually started out of World War II in the United Kingdom for British soldiers to use sport as a way to recover from wartime injury. And so it has that military foundation, but by and large, the Paralympic movement is, there's most of the people in the Paralympics do not come from a military background, but it does have that origin. And for those who may not know, that the Paralympics, the Paralympic team, or it falls under the U.S. Olympic Committee. It's now called the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and it's a movement that's been growing and growing and growing. It's really been cool, even just in my 10, 11 years doing it. It's just seen it grow in terms of coverage and ability for athletes to support themselves financially through doing it, and that's all been really cool. But it's there's just about not as many sports as are in the Olympics, but quite a bit. And for me, I got exposed to cross-country skiing and biathlon. I had gone out to a recruitment camp in San Diego to do adaptive sports. At any level, the Paralympics may be the highest level, but there's all sorts of feeder programs and local community organizations that can provide adaptive sports to anybody that has a physical impairment, or maybe a visual impairment, or even cognitive impairment. But for the Paralympics, it's more focused on physical impairment, visual impairment, or limb impairment, or injury. And I got, in this recruitment camp, approached by the cross-country coach who asked if I was interested in doing biathlon because of my military background. I didn't know what biathlon was. I thought it was running and swimming, but it's actually cross-country skiing with target shooting. And that sounded pretty cool, like doing a stress course in the military where you're running and shooting, or move and shoot. And cross-country skiing was appealing because, well, I was craving just being in the woods and in nature, moving. I loved trail running before my injury, and I had started running on prosthetics, but it certainly wasn't in the woods or up mountains. Hand cycling a little bit outside, but not so in DC. It's not really all that peaceful when you're around cars. So cross-country skiing was also appealing. I went to my first camp in Montana and was exposed to sit skiing. So in Paralympic cross-country skiing, there are 3 divisions: visually impaired, ski standing up with a guide. This other standing category may have arm impairment or minor leg impairment, but they still ski standing up, maybe with just 1 pole and 2 skis. And then the sitting category, which I fall into, which is major leg impairment, where you're skiing with, you're on a seat that's mounted above 2 cross-country skis, and you just have your 2 ski poles. And cross-country skiing is, it's not downhill skiing. You do go down hills, but you very much go uphill, and then you go down, and then you go back up again. And so it's more of an endurance sport, a power sport, and its conditions can be tough. I think, in my opinion, it's the hardest sport in the Paralympics, and it's part of what appeals to me. The conditions can be brutal. I mean, it can be seriously cold. The snow can be slow. You have to power uphill. You don't get gears like you get on a bike.
Yeah.
And so it becomes this physical challenge, but also a mental challenge. And I was hooked when I got exposed to it. I just needed to figure out a way that I could devote my life to the training for this sport. And at the basic level, I just liked being out in the woods again. And then from there, it was like, well, okay, you could train and perhaps you might make the team. It would be just so awesome to go to the Paralympic Winter Games and represent Team USA. So the wheels are in motion now, and then it's just a matter of training and putting in the work and following the training plan.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched video, of you cross country skiing, and I've watched video of you, I mean, immediately just going to the ground, target shooting, popping back up, going again. Tell me a little bit about, what you're training like. I can only imagine the upper body strength and endurance that you have, watching you, use your poles, as like you said, I mean, you're having to go up hills and things like that. So tell me, how, and I love strength conditioning. That's like one of my greatest passions. What are some of the things that you do training?
Sure. I needed to transform my upper body into my engine, and that's tough, especially when you're competing against individuals who may have been born with a major leg impairment that then resulted in their usage of arms from like day one. I mean, we think we use our arms if we are born without any sort of impairment. I was in high school, I like to do pull-ups, but it's different when your sport is entirely upper body based. And so I never had a sport like that. I needed to train and to develop the technique. But as you say, it's a lot of strength and conditioning. It's first and foremost to even tap into your cardio system in cross country sit skiing. You got to develop the strength, because if you don't even have the strength, you can't even tap into like your high heart rates and this kind of thing. So part of that is strength, but also the technique, and then just knowing how to ski and how to ski around the corner. And so I moved out to Colorado, Winter Park, Colorado. I took orders, actually stayed on active duty and moved out there and started training. I had a local coach who was awesome. We really bonded, and he imparted in me, I think for the first time as an endurance athlete, what it really meant, not just the actual training, which was a wealth of knowledge coming from him, but also just the commitment to the lifestyle, the commitment to doing all the little things right, because the little things add up. And training is kind of what we always focus on, but when you start layering on additional things like your nutrition, resting is separate from sleep, but focusing on rest, but also focusing on sleep, hydration, mindset, you can make a lot of gains in just your own mental skills. So putting all of this together and really committing myself to the athlete lifestyle. But I also found that this was really, really good for me coming off of my injury, because I'm finding a sense of purpose, like you said. And that was so important after this disruption in my life, and feeling like everything just my whole world just changed like in the blink of an eye, literally with this one step that I took and a bomb going off. And so now I can be part of a team, and we race as individuals, but we're still a team. And this team has goals, long-term goals. I have long-term goals. I have a specific role. I fit into a structure within this team. We have a support system, wax technicians, coaches, physiologists, nutritionists, massage therapists. And I feel like I'm kind of at the pointy end of the stick, like I felt when I was at the SEAL teams, this whole army of support going so that you can do your job overseas, put these skills to the test overseas, train. The travel is awesome. I'm going to test myself mentally and physically. I mean, this is all, there's just so many ways, and this is adding up to like being the perfect thing for me coming out of the SEAL teams in the military. And so, I mean, that's why I'm still doing it. I'm now 41, and I can't bring myself to stop skiing. And I love it so much for so many reasons. I need to start figuring out how to manage my expectations, because I'm probably getting to the higher age limit of where I could have kind of max performance. And So I was very happy with how the last games went in Beijing most recently. But yeah, I mean, it's just been such beyond any result that I had. It was about getting out in nature, reconnecting with nature, kind of healing my mind, and then committing myself to something that I could put my energy into, and I could see progress and set goals and see the progression, and just been awesome. So I'm so thankful that we have the Paralympic program. This is an international program. It's very competitive, which makes it very also rewarding.
Yeah, it's cool to hear you talk about, those various elements. So when we do mindset training, I work with a number of athletes, those are all things we talk about. I mean, at the highest levels of any sports, people's skill sets are very similar. Their physical sets are very similar, but it's lifestyle versus lifestyle. So like you said, the way you do rest and recovery, your sleep, the nutrition you're putting in, your training, your mindset, all those things, they all come together. They all influence or affect one another. I want to go to real fast the mental aspect, as far as a lot of athletes deal with anxiety. They deal with nerves, right? So they're about to go out and then compete in something that they have dedicated a lot of time, effort, and energy to. And so they get really nervous, and sometimes they underperform because of that. Sometimes they freeze up. Sometimes they, perform great. What are some of the ways that you deal with performance anxiety, or what are some of the ways that you're able to go out and just fully utilize all these things that you're training for?
That's great. And I've thought about this a lot, and I do cross country ski racing and I do biathlon.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's actually, I have different mindsets for each of these sports. I can in a competition, Beijing games, just last week I was still in Beijing. It's been not that long. Even within that race series, I'm fluctuating. Tomorrow's a cross country day or tomorrow's a biathlon day. There's different things going on in my mind. So I'm very much aware about kind of the nature of the sport and what it can do to the mind. And different sports may have different optimal mindset. And even for each person, or people are different too.
Yeah.
Some people might want to be really keyed up before the night before. Maybe some want to be more optimal, in a more optimal way, to be mellow the night before, but then keyed up the next morning, or maybe mellow the next morning. It just depends on the nature of the sport. But for me, I find myself getting more nervous, to be honest, before a biathlon, because you're shooting with a high heart rate under pressure. You might hear the announcer talking. You might hear an athlete literally right next to the mat, right next to you, shooting and hitting shots, and you got to hit your shots. If you miss, and it's very, very precise shooting. If you jerk the rifle slightly, if your mind is elsewhere, or you're not focused, you can easily miss a shot, and then the whole race just changed. There's a lot of pressure, and there's cameras, and people are watching on TV. And this first race here in Beijing, I found myself being really nervous, and I'm just thinking, why am I nervous? I'm like, what's going on? But I felt myself nervous even before going out to China. It's like this lead up. And I think part of it was just this feeling like, because 4 years before, in 2018, the very first race, which was also a biathlon of those games, I unexpectedly got a gold medal. And I wasn't even nervous for that one, because I had no expectations. I just went out there and I hit 9 out of 10. And I thought I had squandered that race, but everybody, because it was a windy day, and all the, at least top people in contention, had kind of missed. And so it kind of reset everything. And I ended up squeaking out a gold medal by 7 seconds on an over 20-minute race. But I wasn't nervous before that one, really. And then, but before Beijing, I'm thinking like, oh, there's expectations, and I'm checking, oh, it doesn't matter. Just do your thing. You don't need to prove anything to anybody. And I just felt myself getting nervous. And then I went out there the next day, and I had one of probably the best biathlon I've ever had the next day in Beijing. And it was a 4th place. And I learned that day that nobody cares about 4th place. But I know that was my best biathlon I've ever had.
Yeah.
You don't always get the result that, because you can't control what other people are doing, or who's on the start list that day. But it seems like these nerves, it was actually what was going to create all this energy. And it just was my body getting ready for war, to go fight, to go compete. And although I don't really like feeling nervous before a biathlon, I started to kind of accept it, that this is just my body getting ready to go engage. And on a cross country day, I don't feel the nerves. Sometimes I know that it's going to just be so painful, because you're just going as hard as you possibly can, fighting for every second. But you just kind of get used to it. And I'm starting to like that. And so I don't get nerves for those races. But the very last race of Beijing, and I didn't have any podiums. This was a different game, so just a different field. It was very competitive, and a lot has changed in 4 years. The very last race, I had been named to our mixed relay team, and I found myself feeling nervous. And I'm thinking, why am I nervous? This is the last race. It's just a cross country race. There's no shooting. Why am I nervous? I'm not nervous for cross country races normally. The difference, and I know what it was. I woke up at 3:30 that morning, and race brain kicked on, and I just was like, I couldn't shut it down. I couldn't fall back asleep again. I'm just laying there like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. But I'm the third leg on this 4-person relay team, and we knew we had a shot at the podium. And I know why I was nervous. It was because I'm now a team member, and other people are counting on me. And that's different than every other cross country race I'd ever done. Never been part of a relay team at a games. And so I think that's why I was nervous, because I didn't want to let my teammates down. And I went out there, and my leg, I hammered it. And I know that I did a really good job. And those nerves were actually, again, just getting me ready to go perform. So to athletes out there that are, the nervousness, it may feel uncomfortable, but it is your body, your mind and your body priming yourself to go perform. And so if you can start to think about just accepting it, and maybe even savoring it, because it's actually a way to feel most alive. And I think it's a very special thing. Anything that can make you nervous, it means you really care about it. And that is amping you up. And that's a really, really cool and special thing.
That's exactly, almost like word for word, what we talk to our athletes about, and one of my college coaches, the very first time I ever made the finals of a college wrestling tournament, he came over and warmed me up, and he said, "You nervous?" And I was like, "Yes, sir." And I was. And he said, "That's just your body getting ready to go to war, man. It's your," and he didn't say this, but it's your sympathetic nervous system, right? So it kicks in, but it makes you a little faster, a little smarter, a little quicker, a little stronger, all those type of things. But you have to learn to accept it and embrace it, like you said, and it's, looking back, those were some of the times I felt most alive, now whenever I'm coaching my athletes and my wrestlers are getting ready, and I can see that in them, it's exciting for me, even as a coach, to be able to feel that. It's awesome to be able to hear you say that and talk about accepting, because so many people get fearful in those moments. They get nervous about being nervous, right? I'm nervous. Like, why am I so nervous? And they begin to freak out. And instead of just saying like, hey man, this is my body getting ready to go out here and battle and do what I've been training to do, and it's not an easy thing, right? But it's a necessary thing.
Yeah. And it's like it never goes away. Even at the highest levels, it's just the higher you go, it just seems like there's more consequences. And so you're constantly, it seems like, if I competed 4 years from now, I'd probably be nervous again for the first biathlon, just because, well, obviously, 4 years have gone by and I've worked this hard and this kind of thing. And so the higher you go, it just seems like there's more consequences or more at stake. But the other thing I would say is the nerves are okay, but sometimes, at least in my sport, I found that I can't expend too much nervous energy before the actual competition. Mm-hmm. Like, sometimes people, they're nervous and they put a little too much energy into the warm up or the pre-competition stuff. And so that's something you just got to be aware of. Your body's getting ready to go fight, but knowing when to turn it on and when to kind of just be keeping yourself in check is also.
I wanted to ask you that. So I teach my athletes, we put a number on it, right? I say a number 1 through 10. Let's say you're 10 minutes out from competing. Some people are like, and some people perform well this way, not many, but they're jacked up like to the point where they're smacking themselves in the face type, pumped up, right? Some people want to be completely chill. So I'll ask you, if you were to put a number 1 through 10, 10 being completely amped up and 1 being like just completely chill, whenever you're optimal, whenever you have performed optimal, where do you think you would be if you put a number on it?
Well, it does depend on the race. And I do long distance racing down to sprinting. And I've learned for the long distance race, I want to know that I'm ready to go, but I don't need to do too much in that warm up. It's easy to over warm up on that. You got a long race ahead of you. You do what you need to do, but ski super easy to like ease into this warm up, and then do a couple ramp ups in terrain that I feel comfortable with, but don't be at the starting line like just wasting energy. Like I need that energy for the actual race. So it's that fine line. And I would say, to your wrestlers, like you gotta be thinking about the energy that you need most is on the mat against the opponent. And so of course you need to be warmed up, but there is that line where like you're actually doing too much and you're just maybe tiring yourself out. You would know better obviously than me for wrestling specificity, but before a sprint race though, I do much more intense and longer warm up than for the long distance day. But I still, like at the start gate, I'm not like wasting a bunch of energy that could have otherwise been put into my pulls on that sprint round or in the final or wherever I am on the sprint.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of people burn a lot of mental and emotional energy way too far ahead of time, in which affects their physical energy when they go out there. But it's incredible to hear you, such a high level athlete, speaking on these things where you need to be. And it's also really interesting to me, just as a coach in general, to hear, the different thought processes between sports, right? And it makes total sense if you have something that's going to be long distance endurance versus sprints. It's pretty cool to hear. All right, as we get ready to kind of wrap this up, because I don't keep you all night. So I'd love to ask a couple of just quick hitter questions. You can expound upon these as much as you want.
Sure.
I believe everybody has like God-given gifts and abilities, and then we get to, of course, try to utilize those in life. If you were to pick your genius, something that you're just really good at, right? So I think everybody has some sort of a genius. What would you say your genius is?
Ooh, well, I'd say it's in work ethic.
Yeah.
I think I don't have amazing talent, but the talent that I do have is in the ability to just kind of work hard and stay consistent, and that is a talent of itself, I guess, if I had to pick something.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great genius to have, right? Because it can be applied to literally any and everything in your life. So absolutely. All right. The last one is, I call this the 3 H's, and we've talked about a hardship, but a hero, a hardship, and a highlight in your life, and of course you went through extreme hardship. But if you were to give us, and again, you can pick one of those or expound upon all 3, whatever you want, but hero, hardship, and highlight in your life.
The hardship is I would say, going through this injury, that was certainly a hardship. Hero, my parents. And highlight, would be having the honor of being a platoon leader at a SEAL team. That was my professional highlight. And if I could do that job for 20 years, I would have done that job for 20 years. Unfortunately, I was only going to be able to do it for 2 years. And then, I did get cut short, but that was such an honor. And if anything, the fact that the platoon could go on and continue the deployment, that I think showed that I at least had given my assistant platoon commanders the opportunity to step into my shoes a little bit during the training workup, and that was important for them, but that they were able to so it's either, I think either they were able to perform so well on the rest of the deployment, either because I wasn't there, and either like as an anchor dragging them down, or they were able to perform well because we had the kind of organization that was able to adapt to the loss of a leader, and that I think really speaks volumes to them. But yeah, I mean, what an awesome job that was, and if I could go back and do that job, I certainly would. It was a huge highlight in my life.
Yep. Okay. Last thing, and this is a time where you got to give some little shout outs here as well. I know relationships are important for everybody in our life. So, if we were to look at your phone and, see the people that you have under your favorites list, who are a few of those people and why?
Well, my girlfriend, Courtney, yeah, she's been awesome. We've been together for over 5 years, and she knows me quite well, and that helped, I think, for me, just knowing that, I mean, to train on the Paralympic team is kind of like being in the military. I'm not equating that by any means. The level of sacrifice is nowhere near, but it is similar in the sense that when the winter hits, I'm gone a lot, and our team typically trains out of Montana. This winter, from November 10 to me getting back from Beijing, March, was it 16th? I was home a total in 5 days, maybe 4 to 5 days, 2 different occasions. So for 5 months, I was home for like 4 days, and I'm just skiing, and it's fun, and that's great. It's not like the sacrifice that military members go through, but it is in some ways a continuation of this lifestyle that I've already had. So to have that kind of support is awesome. And then my mother as well. So those are the two that are in my favorites. I call my mom every Sunday. I'm looking forward to going back to Kansas, hopefully soon. It's just hard to find a gap right now, but I'm hoping to get there before spring, and it's just awesome to go back to the farm, and it's really where I go to relax, and it's the most peaceful place, and a very special one as well, just given the family history.
Yeah, I recently was talking to one of our coaches who went to Shawnee Heights. He's from the area, and so he was kind of telling me about the historical home that you guys grew up in, and a little bit behind that, which is really cool. So, well, Dan, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I want to thank you for your service to the United States, and then how proud we are of you in the Shawnee Heights area. It's the first time I'm getting to meet you, but just know that you're an absolute legend out here.
Oh, that's all. Well, thanks, Chad. And I know in the past I had been asked to kind of be involved with Shawnee Heights, and I've gone through my own personal transition. I'm much more open now. I wasn't talking a lot about my injury or anything like that in the years after my injury, but I'd be more open to come in and speaking to students, because I've kind of matured a little bit, and also just accepted what had happened to me, and finding that to talk about it can help people and also help me. So maybe there's something we could do. It'd be cool to speak to some kids and student athletes, or just students in general at Shawnee Heights, be more involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that the school will be excited about that, and it will be an honor. And man, you've been so motivational and inspirational tonight as we've talked and as we listened. Like I was locked in, man. So anyway, yeah. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chad. It's great to meet you, and I hope we can stay in touch soon.
Sure. So, all right, everybody, listen. This has been another episode of Coach Peace Perspective. May God bless you, smile upon you, and give you peace. Till next time, we're out.